We've stabilized at 11, so I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and begin this webinar. Folks, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on safety for the small business, for the workplace, and I'd like to thank our LA Metro Chamber of Commerce, Katie Palmer. You can see her smiling face right here in our Hollywood Square setup. Katie, thank you very much for all of your support and the sponsoring that you do with LA Metro. We have a great relationship with LA Metro Chamber. I encourage you to join if you're in that area. I encourage you to join any chamber that you are affiliated with in your particular area, as you'll find that that will help your small business grow and that you'll be able to have the networks. I'd like to welcome Dan Fitzsimons today. This is the first webinar of its type that we have offered, to my knowledge. And that's over a number of years, and we think that it will be of some interest to you. We're going to handle this a little bit differently in the sense that before we would ask for questions and answers just right in the Q&A box. But what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and enable each one of the participants I'll enable you to speak. So if you do have a question or something like that, you can just go ahead and jump right in and ask it when you think it is appropriate. I'll also be monitoring the Q&A in the chat window as well there too. But other than that, this is a workshop that is hosted, or primarily it's facilitated by SCORE. And SCORE, we have 3 chapters in Maine. We have the Southern Maine, Central Maine, of which I'm the chairman, and then we have the Northern Maine chapter up in the Bangor area. But we're here for the life of your small business. We'd like to help you do better. We'd like to help you start up if that comes to that. And we'd also like to help you when it comes to that point to also sell your small business. We can do all of those things. But right now, Dan, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and hand it right on over to you, and I will be individually enabling the participants to speak up. Dan, over to you, brother.
Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
What do I need to do? I have it up now.
The little share screen thing there. Why don't you try it, get out of it and then try it again. And Dan, you can email me your presentation. I think you've already emailed me your presentation,
Yeah.
but if you'd like to email me one right now, I'll at least have it ready to tee up in case we have any problems with your particular slide deck.
Okay. Well, hang on. It's not wanting to do what you're talking about. Let's see. Come on. I love it when this stuff happens. So I got my screen up. I've got Zoom running.
So at the bottom of your screen, Dan, your Zoom screen, you should see some panels down below, and below it says share screen. It's a little green square with an arrow.
Right, like normal.
Yeah.
Producing notes instead. I hate this. Back to meeting. Shared screen. Good.
Let me see, Dan. No, I don't. And I'm downloading yours right at the moment, so I should have it here pretty soon.
Oh,
there we go.
Yep, there it is, Dan.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll get back to the start.
All right.
Everybody see that normal? Should be a big picture of cart like keys.
Perfect.
Got it. Okay. My name is Dan Fitzsimons. I live in Turner. Maine's been my home for a very long time. I moved here in 89 to start a business in Auburn. I've owned several different insurance agencies and other things, but along the way, I had a side thing with the Army, and they called me back in a few years back, and I was off to many, many wars, many, many events. When I came back, I ended up in the security world. And so I created a company. specifically to assist in training. It's called 24/7 Defense Training. And today we're going to talk about some pretty basic things. The agenda definitions, because words matter, right? We kind of the things that we're going to be talking about. This is focused on small businesses rather than large companies, because I would imagine most of the folks this is what you're really thinking about. Risk assessments, threats, and how to mitigate those things, and what to do after you've actually had something occur, right? Violence is a big issue, and that's why I put it on our agenda. And you really do need to have a plan for dealing with it. And most importantly, how to keep going after something's actually occurred. See this thing. So what is business security? It basically is you protecting the people and the things that you have from outside threats and sometimes inside threats. Now, the threats are things that can damage you. Very specifically, violence, someone stealing things, vandalizing the company, vandalizing the business. In these days, when everyone's thinking about cyber, what we're really talking about is either taking your data and using it for negative things, or stopping you from using the data that you absolutely have to have on a day-to-day basis. Those are the real things that are involved in business security. It's when I started in business a long time ago, we didn't think about even half of this stuff. Now it's got to be on the front of it's got to be something you're thinking about. Managing risks have always been this very simple formula that you can see there. What's hard to do is put your own company through a critical eye. Because quite frankly, what I see when I look at my own things, I think it's all perfect. You know, I put it together, it's great, you know, everything works the way it's supposed to. But that's not necessarily how it really is. When we're talking about managing risk, you have to make some decisions. I reduce the problem? A simple example of that would be someone falling down and getting hurt coming into the company, into my office, into wherever. Well, I can put some traction sand down, you know, in the winter. That helps that. That's reducing the risk. I'm not eliminating it, but I'm reducing it. What if I can't, I've reduced it, but I really want to, it's just too big for me to manage. Specifically, someone suing the company. Well, you transfer it. That's through paying a premium to an insurance carrier or somebody, a bonding company, whomever it might be. And they're the folks that are going to take that from you. It costs money to do that because they're not just nice guys. They want to get this, it's a company. Avoiding the risk, that's a little trickier. If your company, like in mine, I train folks on how to protect their assets, how to protect themselves, how to protect groups. That can be kind of dicey material sometimes. Can I avoid parts of it? I can try. But frequently you have to define what your company is doing for the outside world. You're selling retail products, you're selling a service, you're protecting assets for someone else, such as a cyber company. What can you just outright avoid doing that reduces the exposure to you losing money? And you always end up in a place where there's risk we just have to live with. You know, I'm going to be out in the public, talking to people, occasionally you make mistakes. Yeah. And can I transfer all my mistakes to an insurance company? Nope. That's why they have language in there saying, you know, we have limitations to what we'll do. So you have to kind of get comfortable accepting some levels of risk. When we break it down into physical risks, now we're really talking about things like access control to the building, to your space, fences and gates, right? And something that's normally not even thought about, which is who are you near? If their exposures are much higher than yours, you might become part of that exact form, that risky behavior. Cyber is a different thing, and we're going to talk a little bit at length about it. Is it possible to eliminate cyber risks? Well, that's why insurance companies these days are paying a lot of attention to this. What kind of things are on the cyber side? One of my little side things, I'm the president of InfraGard for the state of Maine. It's a FBI-based threat program, threat group, more or less. We work with critical infrastructures around the state of Maine. Smaller companies, what really is your threat? Well, what if somebody steals the identity of the company or of an employee? How would they do that? That's dark web kind of stuff where you're getting social security numbers, birthdays, whatever it might be. And the next thing you know, money is gone. Asset, you're being manipulated by someone that you don't even know, and they're most likely not in the United States. They can be, but not necessarily. Business interruption. Along the way, someone does something to your company with the data that you need to have, and it's no longer available to you. Well, that completely interrupts what you're doing. If you're a medical support company, for example, right, you need access to your patient files. Most companies these days have gone to paperless systems. I can remember when I was with insurance companies, there was a big push to everything go paperless. Well, when you have no physical records and someone steals your data, that's a problem. You're literally out of business. Damaging your reputation, same thing. All it takes is a single event occurring where all of it, you go from 5-star to 1-star on a Yelp rating service or something like that, and you might have had anything to do with it. There are cyber folks who know how to do this and will use netbots. You're probably familiar with the phrase netbots. It's just borrowed somebody's computer, and that borrowed computer runs software that is used to attack systems. And that's one of the ways that you can be destroyed quickly. Ransomware, I've actually run into this in the past year in my own little world, and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. That's where companies send you something to say email, you open the wrong email, and the next thing you know, they're locking up your computer unless you pay them money to get rid of this particular product, right? With smaller companies, don't expect them to come looking for millions like you'd see on the news. That's not really how it works. What they're looking for is to put a backdoor into your security systems or whatever you're using, and then go for small amounts of money that you're going to be paying basically for a long time. Again, where does this happen? Primarily outside the United States, but unless you're able to back up everything quickly and get yourself fixed, it's a real problem. And damaging equipment by cyber is becoming something that's quite real. What if you spike equipment so that you're ending up having to make changes that are very, very expensive? As you all know, IT equipment, it's super expensive. It's one of the biggest costs everybody has. Well, what happens when these things start getting damaged? Cyber mitigation, it starts with having a back up your data off-site. Old school, we used to use tape drives, take the tape drive home. Not a bad idea. There was all kinds of simple systems for doing this. Now it's going to the cloud, right? That's just kind of a normal thing. But there needs to be a way to get the material out of the physical location itself. Reason being, what if your building burns and everything you have is still sitting on those internal hard drives? You have a big problem. Pay to have it done. If not, find a way to get it done. Cybersecurity software is very common these days. McAfee, there's lots of companies. I use a thing that comes from, it's through Spectrum for business. It's just literally included. Is it the best? I don't know what the best actually is. When I talk to my other InfraGard guys that are cyber people, they don't know what the best actually is. The reality is that you got to be running something, right? Especially on the malware side, something to try to stop malware from getting on your machine. Multi-factor authentication is something everybody's going to have to kind of live with. You folks probably know what I'm talking about already. One time we just simply put in simple passwords. Well, that's changing. Insurance companies are saying, well, that's nice, but that's not good enough anymore. We want to see that you have a password and you're going to get you're going to get a text message back with a code that gets loaded so we know that's who's who. That's just going to be the way going forward. What I see on the security side is we're moving into biometrics, things such as facial recognition software, fingerprinting. There's a lot of tools, retinal detection. There's a lot of new tools that are helping to define who's who when you're trying to get into a system. COVID brought us people working from home. I don't know how else to put it that way. That's what it amounted to. All of a sudden, folks are home, they have laptops or computers, and all this stuff is just going through the net, right? Back and forth, right? If you own the company, do you know everything that's in that person's access at their house? This is a real thing. This is where NDAs come in, non-disclosure agreements and these kind of things. So if you have employees that are using computers, sometimes, I know I'm a pretty cheap guy, I can make people use their own stuff. There's a reason why companies want you to use a company-owned machine, because if they provide it, then it's their data, it's their stuff. If you quit or whatever, or they fire you, whatever it is, they come back and get it. The same thing is true on a telephone. Limiting access to deeper levels of security within your data. And as you can see, the last little bullet I've got there is a signed non-disclosure agreement. This is all very real now. Even though you might be a small startup company, there's easy ways to get a hold of these things, and you want your employees or anyone who has access to this to sign this agreement, if it will. Generally speaking, if you get someone to sign away some rights that they cost you money, that's generally what happens. But this is a big deal. You don't want folks taking the work that they did for you and then using it later as a weapon. Let's talk about physical threats for just a little bit. Hope I'm not going too fast for folks, but this is kind of a quickie overview brief. Identifying physical threats, we usually break them into two groups: natural threats and human caused, right? Everyone in Maine knows what weather-related things look like right now. We just went through a couple of floods, right? Where Mexico went underwater, Madison went underwater, the folks down by the beach got destroyed with that 14-foot high wall of water that was pushed in at 60 miles an hour off the ocean. Lots of damage. That's natural related things, right? Maine is kind of used to floods in the springtime caused by melting water, you know, that kind of stuff, ice jamming up against bridge abutments and things, backing up and causing big problems. But we're kind of used to it. What we're seeing now, though, is this severity is going up. Did Mexico ever think it was going to go underwater? Probably not. When I went up to see what was going, I helped with some disaster relief things with a couple of different agencies, a thing called Team Rubicon and another one called Samaritan's Purse. And when I took a look at what was going on in Rumford for an assessment, I've never seen water levels like that before, anywhere. Water was coming down the Androscoggin like it was coming straight out of a fire hose, ignoring that there was even a dam there. It's just an incredible volume. We're going to have to get used to this. This is just a reality. And so as you have, wherever your office might be located or your car dealership or whatever it is, this is a real thing. We're going to have to be paying close attention to just how far away from water you are. If you're in the floodplain, it's insurance. You're not going to be able to get loans, anything that was backed by a federal agency of any sort, unless you've got flood coverage. And the only way to find that out, just go to your town office. They'll have the flood maps and they'll show you exactly what your flood zone is. Windstorm damage is another one. Maine occasionally does have a tornado. We've had F1 tornadoes. Most of the time what we see are these northeast storms blowing in 40, 50, 60 knots of wind. Trees landing on things, trees landing on expensive things like antennas and wires and generators, things like that. So it can't be ignored. Generally, these are what insurance is all about, right? We got to make sure that these are covered things. But when we're talking about a business, if you're a tenant in a larger building, right, and that building is damaged by trees that fall on it, it might not be directly on yours, but it takes you out too. This is business interruption type problems. Uncontrolled fires is a new one. We haven't seen that kind of thing in a long time because fire control has been pretty much like well cared for. Not lately. Everyone has seen these wildfires that seem to take off. There's one in Texas right now. They're very different. I've seen a few of them and it really does overwhelm everybody involved. Wind gets mixed in there and the next thing you know, everything is burnt to the ground. I was in Maui just not too many months ago working with that fire that was in Maui. And I've never seen anything like that. It's utterly the complete destruction of a town by fire and is a good sized town. Unique. And again, we're talking about threats. Can you mitigate this? Insurance. This is one you transfer. Now, human cause is a little different. That's where people with bad intent are doing things. When I added bad intent, because generally speaking, happy, nice people don't do these things. They don't break into houses. They don't break into businesses. They don't steal things for the most part. They don't threaten violence or use violence against other folks. And generally speaking, your assets are your assets. This is like 10 commandment kind of stuff, you know. Don't take my stuff. Don't take my don't take my life. Don't damage my family, that kind of thing, right? Those are human caused events. Physical mitigation, again, water damage, keeping vital records off-site. I've gone through this several times. It really does pay if you have physical records to get them out of the office every once in a while, meaning put them in plastic storage tubs, rent an off-site place and put things away. Strangely, the IRS, they're not necessarily always your friend and they want to see things. They want to see records, right? And if you don't have them, those audits are very different. It's a good idea to move things off if you can. A sprinkler or a highly protected building, that's a really good thing. So my little office is not highly protected I'm in right now. It's just a basic, frame structure. But if you have sprinklers, that's a good thing. What happens when you have a sprinkler release when you didn't want one? That's a bad thing. And that causes other kinds of trouble, right? So you're damaging things that are in the structure because somebody took a lighter and set off the sprinkler system for whatever reason, right? Windstorm damage, same thing. We don't have the same kind of tornado damage and things like that we see around the country, but it is happening. And I would expect it in New England. It's going to continue to trend forward. Can't explain why. It just seems to be what's going on. To mitigate fire, have a fire extinguisher. It's not that complicated. Small ones, yeah, you can put them out. If it starts to move fast, right? Because you've got some kind of accelerating material there, well, you don't have time. It's time to go. You're going to depend on your insurance now, but you're going to be out of business for a little bit. as this structure fire or whatever happens, has to be dealt with. If you're in a multi-story building, such as a steel and glass type thing, and you have an office in there, right? And somebody else has a fire, be prepared that the air handlers, meaning the systems on the roof, are going to push some of that smoke and junk right through your space. And so your space is going to have to be cleaned too. It's really nasty. When you actually have a fire and all those gases are kept in the structure and get circulated through the system, like through the air system, it makes a gigantic mess. And your employees are not going to want to come in and work there. So that's a thing that has to be thought about. Now, this is the stuff that most folks are thinking about these days. Physical mitigations, right? Meaning humans. It always starts with the keys. It really does. Do you have keys, access control, and understand who owns those keys? Now, this costs a lot of money. Excuse me just a second. Make this go away. When employees leave and they have copies to keys, this is a problem. Rekeying buildings over and over again gets very expensive, but it's definitely something to be thought about. RFID systems, where you have a radio frequency identification system of some sort, you pass the little thing past it, allow folks in and out. Those are easy to change, right? That's just done on a few keystrokes. Physical keys get a lot more expensive. Alarm systems, same thing. I have my little place, I use a Simply Safe system. It's just like a kind of a semi do-it-yourself sort of thing, but it works, right? You just put the sensors in and you have it has a central station alarm that goes with it, right? I've actually had the door open up in here by mistake, and before I knew it, the sheriff's department was here. It was faster than I could get here. It was excellent. But what happens when those alarms have codes and someone changes positions? You need to start changing those codes, because you can they can take that key, disable the alarm system, and basically do whatever they wanted to do with your space, right? Intrusion systems are just that. There's different types of them, very complex. Without getting into the big details about it, it's basically sensing who's moving in this space and at what height above the floor they're moving. This matters. If you got if the system is so sensitive that you're being called every 10 minutes because a mouse ran across the floor, that's no good. At the same time, if it's not sensitive enough and somebody breaks in because they know how to do it, that's no good either. So a balance is what you're looking for. Violence. This is kind of obviously a difficult thing in the Lewiston, Auburn area, right? We're seeing a big uptick in violence, just general civilian violence, people harming each other. Even as a small company, you really do need to have some sort of violence action plan. We call them emergency action plans. OSHA calls them that. If you have employees, you're obligated to have a plan for managing this kind of thing. So say, for example, you're a small convenience store. Potential for robbery is pretty high. There's a difference between burglary and robbery, right? Somebody comes in during the day, points a gun at your worker and say, I want your stuff. Generally speaking, property crimes, we want to give them the stuff. That's the way. If they're attempting to harm people, right? Actually, physical harm, we're going to get into that just a little bit more. But at first, think about it. People are threatening someone else. It's just stuff. Give them the stuff. Smash resistant doors is something that a group called CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, is encouraging, Department of Homeland Security is encouraging that people think about smash-resistant glass doors. Now, what we're talking about here, there's a film that can be added to a door, right? That someone can bash on it. The glass is going to kind of stay together. It'll still break, but it'll resist being smashed in quickly. Probably seen on the news where folks have glass demonstration cases, right? And then in come 5 guys with hammers and they just start smashing and they go to 1 million pieces. And then all this expensive stuff goes out the door, right? Well, there is smash resistant glass, right? That's available for this kind of thing. Depends on how valuable the products are that you're in there, right? But on the door side, this is a good thing, right? Not being able to bash the door in is a good thing. The standard that they're using now for places like houses of worship and larger community spaces, they want those doors to be able to resist 10 minutes of smashing against it. It's very difficult to produce a door that can do it, right? But this is how serious it's getting, this smash and grab idea, and that what can be done to mitigate it. An insider threat, we don't really want to think about this, but it always happens. I can remember a long time ago when I was young, my dad owned an insurance agency also, and he had an insider severely damaged his business. I remember as a young person listening to the story of how this stuff happens, right? Fraud's a real thing. This is they see your company doing well. This is an internal employee, and they think, well, he'll never miss this, right? And the next thing you know, it's 10 for you, 1 for me kind of a thing, right? You'll never know. It's kind of small. They're stealing things. This is bad news. But what it really does on the private sector side is that it goes to your reputation. If it gets out into the public that you've been fraudulently damaged by some employee or whatever, it's not a good thing, right? It's far better to control this way up front than to try to come back and say, oh, somebody stole $100,000 from this company or whatever it is. Yeah, people feel all righteous fixing it, but nobody really wants their company being accused of something like that. That's not a good idea. Copied client data. That's a very old-fashioned thing. So I have a sales guy, for example, right? And they have their own, their leads, their people that they're working with. They get angry, move on. Well, who paid for developing all that? Well, you did, but they're not going to keep it and then use it as a weapon against you. That's, again, non-disclosure agreements, non-compete agreements. Those are argued back and forth, whether they're viable or not. Get them signed. They're appropriate. Can you make a non-compete agreement that goes on forever? Generally speaking, no, it won't hold up. But it will hold up on the short term. And that's really what you got to worry about. Folks that have dual loyalties. Now, this is a little social side, right? So say you have an employee, right, that is right into, I don't know, pick a hot button subject, such as environmentalism, right? And you're selling fuel oil. And they think that's just the end of the world. You're going to destroy the planet, right? And they end up they end up damaging your company just because of their social concerns, right? Just make sense and be aware of this, right? And false records. That all kind of goes back to the fraud side, right? I'm changing my record so that you won't see that I'm taking 15 cents out of every $10 or whatever it is. And the aggregate is what they're trying to get to. Insider threat mitigation looks like this. This is a book that's very effective on this. It starts with assume everybody lies. And they do. Let's not pretend. Everybody lies. I lie, everybody's lying. I'm not perfect, right? It's just something that happens. So you have a non-compete agreement. Makes sense. Now everybody's kind of clean. We understand what we're doing here. Expense account management. You know anyone who's ever kind of padded that? No, everybody's true and honest, right? Nobody lies, right? Use only company provided computers and phones for what I talked about, right? Which is if you provide that, then you own it, your company owns it, and you own what's on it, right? Encourage folks to have their own machines, their own stuff for doing their own whatever it might be, Facebooky things and all that kind of stuff, especially in the world of social media, where very rapidly your company can be damaged by social media players. Security alarm systems, again, very technical. Burglar alarms, fire alarms, smoke detector systems. There's a lot of them. And just depends on how complex the assets are that are being protected. If you can see by this picture, those are cameras that are functioning in low light, which is important. Somebody breaks in at night, you want to know who it is. Now, one of the other, I'm going to slightly technical thing, but it really is true. These days, we're having challenges with cameras. We install them in places where they're up high and in corners and things like that, looking down. Think about all the folks that use hoodies. Seen this lately. And so we're using facial recognition software, but it doesn't work very well when somebody has a baseball hat and a hoodie on. We're not going to get any of the imagery that's needed. There's new types of systems that measure gaits, like how a person walks and things like this, right? But now we're getting very expensive, way beyond what the small business people are thinking about. If you install a camera, even just one, or I should say a system, you might want to have one that's not quite up in the corners, but actually could get a shot at somebody's face. Because if it's all up top, there you can defeat those systems. Ones that are not quite that high, well, those are tough to defeat, and they're there for a purpose. Environmental sensors, same thing. Those are things like heat sensors, carbon dioxide, right? Whatever it is that's required for your particular environment, right? Now, what to do after something's happened. You had a cyber intrusion, right? Here's the first thing. Isolate that machine. If you're using hardwired Cat5 cables or whatever it is, right, you unplug it, right? That's just like an obvious thing, right? But most folks are using a lot of systems, I should say, are wireless, especially in small businesses, right? So that means you're going to have to shut the thing down. If you think that someone has gotten into it. The truth is, electricity moves at the speed of light. So if it attacked one system, they most likely attacked them all. But the only way to find out is to actually run the software. As soon as you know this has happened, change the password immediately. Just right away. It's pretty simple. Start checking credit cards. Now, it's a normal tactic that if I penetrated your system, I don't immediately go back and start attacking your financial assets. That's not usually how it's done. It's wait a little bit because they want you to be comfortable, right? Before they start pulling money out. You don't wait. I've had to, strangely, in the past year alone, I've had to do this 3 times. Contact the bank, make the changes right away. For them, it's super easy. It's really not complicated. It's a pain in the neck, but you're protecting your assets, right? Run the diagnostic software, see what happens. Oh, look at this. Look what I found. Okay, got it. It's got to be isolated, fixed. Ransomware especially, right? You don't want to be having to make $3,000-$4,000 payments to some guy in Estonia that to just allow you to get back in business. And I talked about this before, confirm that you have a backup copy, right? Because usually the solution includes putting a clean copy back on it. The product before used to be called ghosting. And ghosting was a way to, I gotta turn this off, excuse me. I'm so sorry, I can't kill the phone off. There it goes. To rapidly rebuild a system. So what that amounts to is you have a clean system that's saved, that's everything. All your, everything you need is on a clean copy. And then you blow up, eliminate, delete whatever the damaged thing, and you put on the clean one. It's not going to have the most latest information, but it's going to be close. And it's the fast way to kind of to address this. Now, how about a crime, right? An actual physical problem. Call 911. Don't even delay. Just call them. Get them moving your way. This is the most important part, is getting help moving your way. You want to minimize any kind of ongoing damage if that's possible. So in other words, if you've actually got some kind of a violent person, you don't want lots of your employees being engaged in this. You back them away, move them away from this scene, put them in an office or someplace and close the door, right? Don't let this just get worse and worse, right? Focus on the people, not so much the things. Now, sometimes these folks will just start bashing and vandalizing and all this kind of stuff, right? Generally speaking, these people are what are called judgment proof. You know what I mean? You can sue them all day long, but you're not going to see anything. It's a problem. Becomes an insurance company thing, right? How to get made whole again. They start bashing away, but if they start bashing on people, that's a different story, right? And protecting people is really what the goal is. You want to limit access. Once this has happened, you now have a crime scene. With a crime scene, the police need to know that this place is somewhat sterile, right? It hasn't been manipulated or bad things have had happening here. You just want the person to go away. Which leads to this big one. I spend a lot of time in this area lately. Do I fight back? Well, this is my opinion. Resisting crime is very dangerous. Someone who has crossed in their mind that they're willing to harm you or harm others over their own, whatever the thing is that they think is wrong, right? That's a really big step in a person's mind. And most folks will never, ever do this. Protect the people first. This is literally what has to be done. I can't give you examples of every little thing that we deal with, but I do know they're all a little bit different. There is some standardized things as far as responding goes, right? But every event is just a little bit different. And so if you're taking, for example, you might be a martial arts guy and you're after 5 years of taking all this stuff and you're a black belt this or that or brown belt, and something bad happens. Frequently street criminals, they don't take those classes. They're just feral people and they will do almost anything. And thus someone who's trying to respond with some kind of systemized thing, they might do okay, but frequently they get hurt very badly. So think twice before you have the person that works with you or yourself decide to take someone on physically, right? There's a rule that we used in the Army. I spent a long time in the Army. We don't like to take somebody on without a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning 3 good guys to 1 bad guy. I was working with the FBI SWAT team just a little bit last year, and same thing. They don't send people out alone. No way. If they think something's going wrong and it's going to go physical, you don't send people alone. It's a good way to get hurt. Maine law does require that you avoid this confrontation if at all possible, and you got to allow this criminal to get away. It's important that they just go, get out of here. Don't do anything, just go, right? And they will go, generally speaking, unless someone's already crossed in their mind, a sociopathic type person that's willing to harm others for no reason at all. Very, very difficult. What you cannot do is actually encourage the violence. Specifically, some guys, I don't know, causing problems in your store and they start swearing or threatening people and all this kind of stuff, and you decide to chime in with some words, right? Well, that can be considered escalating this thing, and you could become part of that. Unless you've been trained how to de-escalate folks, and this is something that I do, help folks learn this. You really got to slow it down or just be quiet, get them out of there, right? Now, everyone always has a right to defend themselves. There's a thing called the escalation of force. The courts understand it. As we move from just being present to talking to, oh boy, we might have to use some soft open hand things to closed hand things to deadly force. Everybody has a right to continue to breathe, to live, right? If someone is producing imminent grave bodily injury or death, yes, you can use deadly force against that person, but that's at the very tiniest space, right? The most common question these days is about handguns. I'm not going to get too deep into this. Just know the only time it's appropriate, imminent grave bodily injury or death to yourself or others. That's the only time. In brandishing a handgun, meaning pulling one out and pointing it at someone, is a crime in the state of Maine. Now, again, imminent grave bodily injury or death, this is the legal standard of yourself and others. And in the end, when it's all over with, you want to still be there, right? You want business recovery. This is really important, right? When somebody steals money, that's where bonds come in. Surety bonds are about, that's an insurance policy for cash, more or less, right? So when somebody's stealing things, your small business owner policy, BOP, or whatever you have, has language in there specifically talking about bonds. And you pay a premium for that. That's a very expensive premium per the amount of what you're getting. If you've had a loss, let the adjusters for the insurance company have a legal right to see the property, to see the damage, right? So don't try to change that. If they can't see the damage, they have no obligation to pay you. So let them see whatever it is, right? When there's a data breach, CISA, Cybersecurity Agency folks, they really do. This is a best practices piece. Don't be slow. Tell your clients, however way you get it out to them, this has happened, right? And you're taking all steps necessary to secure the breach. When you don't, and this has been a big issue with things like Equifax, right? Big company. Well, they decided to try to fix it before they told anybody. Instead, all the damage was done, and now they have massive problems, right? So this is not one that you drag your feet on. Insider threats, same thing. Somebody has stolen property, stolen specifically like client lists and things like that. That's kind of on the internal side, right? You have to deal with that directly. Social media updates, same thing. So if you suddenly see you go from 5 stars to 1 star, pay attention. Someone is doing that intentionally to harm you, and you want to shut that down quickly. That's why it pays to have folks on that you're working with who actually understand managing social media, because since that's a primary method communicating these days, if you just ignore it, then it's at your risk. That's who I am. I am a couple different things. The 24/7 defense thing is a school where we teach defensive skills, not karate type skills, but this is actual physical defense. New England Faith-Based Security Alliance is a primary ministry that I do. I train churches and houses of worship in the 6 states of New England in protecting themselves. And with that, I've gone as fast as I could. Does anyone have any questions? The easiest way to do this is just to talk rather than sending text messages and that kind of thing.
Please, all of you are enabled to talk. All you have to do is unmute yourself, and then once you've finished your question, please mute yourself again. And sometimes, Dan, sometimes we don't get any
That's
any
fine. too.
questions or comments. So
Yep, that's fine.
I put in the chat too that we will be sending a copy of this presentation to you along with Dan's slide deck. And of course, you have all of Dan's contact information as well. We'll also be sending you a short survey. It's up to you whether or not you would like to complete it or not, but we always appreciate feedback. And if you would fill it out and rate us, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, can I throw something out, John, just to be
Yes,
on
sir.
the contentious side? I have just a couple, we have just about 4 or 5 more minutes left.
Yes.
After the Lewiston shooting, has this made any of the folks that are listening today change how they do things on a day-to-day basis? The few days after it happened, I was getting calls, and other folks were getting calls immediately. Folks were buying massive numbers of firearms. And I mean, it was massive, in the hundreds and hundreds.
Wow.
And they weren't being trained. They're just buying guns with bullets and walking out the door. It's made a lot of folks in law enforcement and the security side kind of nervous, right? Like, whoa, this is a big deal. If you're going to have the ability to take someone's life, should you know when you can or not, right? These are like big issues, right?
Right.
And specifically, in gun-free environments, which is most places, quite frankly, most folks don't carry firearms around with them all the time. A few do, but not that many. Is it making the general public very nervous? I don't know. The questions I've been getting from folks in the general public, it's ticking back up again. But it was very acute for about 2 months. You couldn't, it looked like Walmart when you went into a gun shop. Zillions of people, right? Buying everything in the store. So anyway, that's just my observation. And I hope it hasn't permanently scarred people. I know it scarred me when I heard what was going on, right? And what had happened. And I deal with this stuff on a regular basis.
Well, Dan, you've just provided us a lot of non-lethal means that we can use, that any business owner can use to enhance their security. I really appreciate that.
Good. Good.
Folks do too. We'll be sure to forward any kind of feedback, but you have Dan's information right there. Do not hesitate to give him a call or give him an email or whatever. He's a trusted SCORE asset, and we really appreciate you. Folks, I wanted to make sure that you realize that this was co-sponsored by the LA Metro Chamber of Commerce, and we really appreciate Katie Palmer and her entourage, their continued support and their cooperation. We encourage you, if you are in that area, to join the chamber. You'll definitely get a benefit out of that, but also that you can join other chamber. There are various other chambers you can join as well and benefit from there. And just a reminder that if you do want to have a SCORE mentor, don't hesitate to get on score.org. You will be able to fill out a short online form there and request a mentor, and we'll match one with you as soon as we possibly can, and that you'll have a relationship with that mentor for as long as you think is necessary or would like to have necessary. We are a business partner of the Small Business Administration. We have 3 chapters in Maine, and we've helped over 11 million people since SCORE's inception in 1964. We look forward to working with you through the life of your business. And Dan, is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we shut down for the afternoon?
Thank you so much for hearing me out. This was a surprise and a treat to do this. And it's wholly appropriate, especially in the environment that we're living in right now.
And we hope to see you again, Dan. This was a great workshop. We're already getting some good feedback.
Good. Good.
All right. Thank you again, Katie. All right. We'll see you later, and you'll get this presentation within a few business days, all the participants. All right.
Thank you.
Out here.